The silent perimeter alert vibrated against my wrist at 3:11 inches the morning. Sublevel garage 2. Motion detected. I was already awake, standing in my penthouse office with the East Coast sprawled beneath me like a conquered map. The whiskey in my glass had gone warm an hour ago. Sleep had abandoned me months back, right around the time the Syndicate Wars turned from threats to body counts. I set down the glass and pulled up the camera feed on my phone. 48 cameras monitored every shadow on my property. The underground garages, especially impenetrable, steel-reinforced, accessible only through biometric locks that recognized 3 people on Earth. I was one of them. The grainy night vision footage showed nothing at first. Just rows of vehicles sitting in perfect formation. My matte black Aston Martin, the vintage Ducati, the armored SUVs. Then, in the corner behind the Aston, a flicker of movement. A shape, small and hunched, collapsing against the concrete wall. My hand moved to the Sig Sauer in my desk drawer. Intruders didn't breach my garages. Not with the security protocols I maintained, the reinforced entry points, the reputation that made grown men reconsider their life choices. Whoever this was had either lost their mind or lost all other options. I was betting on the latter. Stupid people didn't make it past the exterior gates. I moved through my penthouse with practiced silence. Years of surviving in this world had taught me how to disappear even in my own home, across marble floors, down the private elevator, through the reinforced corridor that connected to the underground levels. My security team would be watching the feeds, fingers on triggers, waiting for my command. I gave them nothing. Whatever this was, I wanted answers before bullets. The garage stretched out in eerie fluorescent lighting, the kind that turned everything pale and lifeless. I entered through the access door, weapon raised, scanning the space with tactical precision. My vehicles sat like sleeping predators, chrome and steel catching the harsh light. And there, behind the Aston Martin, exactly where the camera had shown, was a crumpled figure motionless now, either hiding or too broken to run. "Show yourself," I commanded, my voice cutting through the underground silence. Slowly, hands visible. Nothing. No response. No movement. I approached with calculated steps, gun trained on the shape, every instinct screaming trap. Marcus's people had tried to kill me twice this year. This could be an explosive, a diversion, anything. But when I rounded the Aston Martin and got my first clear look, everything in me went still. It wasn't a hired killer. It was a woman. Early 20s, maybe younger, impossible to tell through the damage. She was huddled against the wall, knees drawn up, arms wrapped around herself like she could hold her broken pieces together. Dark hair matted with something wet blood, probably. Bare feet, cut and filthy. Nothing but torn clothing that had once been white. And bruises. Christ. The bruises. Her face was a battlefield of purple and black, one eye swollen, completely shut, cheekbone distorted, lips split and crusted dark. More bruises covered every visible inch of skin. Fresh ones, angry and violent. Older ones fading through sickening shades of yellow and green. Whoever had done this hadn't lost control once. They'd done it systematically, repeatedly, over time. I lowered the gun. Something unfamiliar clawing its way through the carefully constructed walls I'd built around myself. Something I hadn't felt since I was young enough to believe in saving people. Protective fury. She didn't look at me. Didn't speak. Just trembled there against the concrete like she expected another blow. I holstered my weapon and crouched down slowly, keeping distance between us. "Who did this to you?" Her breath came in shallow gasps. When she finally lifted her head, the one eye that could still open fixed on me with terror so pure it felt like a physical thing. "Please," she whispered, voice cracked and raw. "Please, don't send me back. He'll kill me." The words hit me harder than any bullet I'd taken. I was Andrew Schaefer. I'd built an empire on cold calculation and zero mercy. I'd ordered executions, burned bridges, destroyed anyone who threatened what was mine. I'd stopped feeling things like compassion years ago. It was a liability in my world, a weakness that got you killed. But something in her voice, that desperate, shattered plea, cracked something open inside me that I'd thought was dead. I didn't know it yet, but in that moment, everything changed. Because the woman bleeding on my garage floor wasn't running from some random enemy. She was running from Marcus Hale, the man who'd once been my mentor, my brother, the person who'd shaped me into what I'd become before vanishing into the shadows years ago, after a betrayal that nearly destroyed everything. And she was about to tell me exactly what kind of monster he'd become in the darkness. If stories about broken people finding strength in the darkest places resonate with you, you're in the right place. Subscribe and join a community that believes healing is possible even when the world says otherwise. Drop a comment and tell me, would you have opened that door? I brought her upstairs, slowly, keeping my movements deliberate, my voice low and controlled. Can you walk? She nodded without looking at me, pushing herself up against the wall with trembling hands. Every step seemed to cost her something: pain, energy, whatever fragile courage kept her moving. We took the service elevator, avoiding the main corridors where my overnight security might see her and ask questions I didn't have answers for yet. The silence between us was thick with her fear, not fear of the dark hallways or the unfamiliar estate, fear of me. She kept 3 feet of distance at all times, eyes tracking my hands like she expected violence. I'd seen that kind of fear before. It didn't come from one bad night. It came from conditioning. The guest suite was in the east wing, far from my quarters, close to an exit if she needed one. I opened the door and stepped back, giving her space to enter on her own terms. She moved past me like a ghost, taking in the room with that same hypervigilant awareness. Bathrooms through there, I said quietly. Lock works from the inside. She nodded again, still hadn't spoken since the garage. In better light, the damage was worse than I'd thought. Fresh bruises blooming purple across her cheekbone, older ones fading to yellow along her arms, signs of dehydration in her cracked lips, the hollows under her eyes, scarring on her wrists that looked deliberately placed. Long-term abuse. Systematic. I'm calling a doctor, I said. Her head snapped up, panic flooding her face. No, please, no. They'll report it. They'll send me back. Not this doctor. I pulled out my phone. Dr. Rivera doesn't report anything to anyone. That's why I pay him. Please. Her voice cracked. You don't understand. If anyone knows I'm here. I stopped, meeting her eyes directly for the first time. Listen to me. No one is sending you anywhere. You have my word. She stared at me like she was trying to decide if my word meant anything. I made the call anyway. Rivera arrived 30 minutes later with his black medical bag and no questions exactly why he'd been on my payroll for 8 years. He examined her while I waited outside, listening to the soft murmur of his voice, the long silences. When he emerged, his expression was carefully neutral, professional. Long-term physical abuse, he said quietly. Months, maybe years. Malnutrition, dehydration, old fractures that healed wrong. Psychological trauma I'm not equipped to assess. He paused. Whoever did this to her did it repeatedly, methodically. Something cold settled in my chest. The kind of rage I hadn't felt since I was younger, when I still thought I could save people. Will she be okay? Physically? With time and proper care. Psychologically? Rivera shook his head. That's beyond my expertise. I paid him double and walked him out personally, ensuring he understood the importance of discretion. When I returned to the guest suite, she was sitting on the edge of the bed, staring at her hands. Rivera had cleaned and bandaged the worst injuries, left medication on the nightstand. Who did this to you? I asked again. She shook her head violently. I can't tell you. Why not? Because if I tell you, you'll die. Her voice dropped to a whisper. Or worse. I almost laughed. There wasn't much worse than dead in my world. But something in her eyes stopped me, genuine terror, not for herself, but for me. I pulled out my phone and texted Cole, my second in command. Need deep background check. Female, early 22nds, dark hair, currently in my guest suite. No names yet. Keep it quiet. His response came immediately. Understood. I looked back at her. Get some rest. We'll talk when you're ready. She didn't look like she believed me, but she was still here. That was a start. She didn't speak for 2 days. I had food brought to her room, simple things that wouldn't upset a compromised system. Toast, broth, water. Most of it went untouched. Doctor, Rivera came back once to check her vitals. left more medication she probably wasn't taking. I didn't push. Pushing broke people like her further. On the third morning, I found her standing at the window of the guest suite, staring out at the grounds. She'd showered, her dark hair was clean, pulled back from her face, making the fading bruises more visible. 3 years, she said without turning around. I was taken almost 3 years ago. I stayed in the doorway, giving her space. Taken from where? College. I was walking back to my apartment after a late class. Her voice was flat, mechanical. My stepbrother owed money to someone. A lot of money. He couldn't pay, so he paid with me instead. The words landed like body blows. He sold you. To settle his debt. She finally turned to face me. The man who bought me, he's powerful, connected. People like you probably know him. He told me that if I ever told anyone, they wouldn't believe me. Or worse, they'd send me back to him. Who is he? She started shaking, arms wrapping around herself. You'll try to do something. You'll get yourself killed. He has people everywhere, police, judges, politicians. He's untouchable. I took one step into the room, hands visible, non-threatening. I've survived this long by knowing exactly who my enemies are. Give me his name. He'll come for me. Her voice cracked. He'll burn everything down to get me back. Then I need to know who I'm preparing for. She stared at me for a long moment, tears streaming down her face. When she finally spoke, it came out barely above a whisper. Marcus Hale. The name hit me like a gunshot to the chest. Everything stopped. The air in the room, my heartbeat, time itself. Marcus Hale, my mentor. The man who'd found me at 19, running packages for street dealers, and turned me into something more. Who'd taught me strategy, discipline, how to build power instead of just taking it. Who'd been practically family before he vanished 6 years ago, after a betrayal that nearly destroyed everything I'd built. Marcus Hale, who I'd assumed was either dead or smart enough to stay gone forever. You're lying, I heard myself say. She flinched like I'd struck her. I knew you wouldn't believe me, but I could see it in her eyes, the absolute sincerity, the terror that came from telling a truth she'd been forced to keep silent. No one could fake that kind of fear. Marcus Hale, I repeated, the name tasting like poison. You're sure? He made sure I'd never forget. Her hand moved unconsciously to her wrist, where the scars were. He talked about you sometimes, about Andrew Schaefer. Said you were a monster even worse than him. That if I ever thought about running to anyone for help, you'd be the last person who'd save me. The room tilted slightly. Marcus had spent 3 years holding this woman captive, torturing her, making her believe the entire world was complicit in her suffering. And he'd used my name to do it, turned me into another nightmare to keep her obedient. Listen to me very carefully, I said, my voice harder than I intended. You're safe here. Marcus will never touch you again. I promise you that. She laughed a broken, hollow sound. You can't promise that. Nobody can. I just did. You don't understand what he's capable of. Yes, I interrupted. I do. Better than anyone. Because Marcus had taught me everything he knew. Every tactic, every strategy, every ruthless calculation. He'd shaped me into a weapon, and then he'd disappeared before I could turn that weapon on him. Now I knew why he'd vanished. He'd been building something in the shadows, something even darker than the world we'd inhabited together. And this woman standing in my guest suite, still shaking with fear, she was the evidence of exactly what Marcus had become. I pulled out my phone and texted Cole. Background check complete. I need everything on Marcus Hale. Current location, associates, properties, finances, everything. No time limit. This is priority 1. When I looked back at her, she was watching me with those haunted eyes. What's your name? I asked quietly. Janet, she whispered. Janet Vieira. Janet. I committed it to memory. Marcus made a mistake letting you get away, and he made an even bigger mistake letting you find me. She didn't look convinced, but somewhere behind the fear, I saw the smallest flicker of desperate hope. It would have to be enough. Cole arrived at my office 72 hours later with a tablet and an expression I'd rarely seen on him, disgust mixed with professional concern. You're not going to like this, he said, setting the device on my desk. I was already standing, too restless to sit. Show me. He pulled up the first file. Financial records, meticulously documented. Marcus Hale has been operating off the grid for 6 years. Multiple shell corporations, offshore accounts in the Caymans and Singapore. He's moved approximately $40 million through these channels. Doing what? Cole's jaw tightened. Trafficking. High-end escort services that aren't services at all. He's got safe houses in 3 states, Pennsylvania, Connecticut, New York. Properties registered under dummy LLCs that trace back to holding companies that trace back to nothing. He swiped to the next screen. Surveillance photos. Women entering and leaving unmarked buildings, always accompanied, never alone. He's built an entire network, Cole continued. Buyers, transporters, enforcers. It's sophisticated, professional, and he's kept it completely invisible even to us. How is that possible? Because he learned from the best. Cole looked at me directly. He learned from you how to compartmentalize operations, how to keep information siloed, how to make sure no one sees the full picture except the person at the top. The words landed like an accusation. Marcus had taken everything I'd taught him and twisted it into something monstrous. The girl, I said. Janet Vieira. You find her in the records? Cole nodded, pulling up another file. A transaction ledger, clinical and precise. Purchased 3 years ago. Payment rendered by a Daniel Vieira gambling debt, $200,000. The girl was transferred to Marcus's primary estate in Pennsylvania. I felt my hands curl into fists. Her stepbrother had sold her like property, and Marcus had bought her like an asset. There's more. Cole's voice dropped. Marcus knows she's gone. One of his properties was breached 4 days ago, same night she showed up here. He's been making calls, reaching out to his network. He's looking for her. Does he know she's here? Not confirmed. But Marcus isn't stupid. He knows your history together. If she ran to anyone, you'd be on the short list. I turned toward the window, mind calculating possibilities. Marcus would come. Not today, maybe not tomorrow, but eventually. And when he did, it wouldn't be subtle. Double the perimeter security, I ordered. Rotate the guards every 6 hours. No one enters this property without biometric verification and visual confirmation from 2 separate checkpoints. I want eyes on every access point 24/7. Understood. And Cole, I looked back at him. This stays between us. Janet doesn't need to know how close he might be. She found out anyway. I didn't realize she was outside my office until I heard the sharp intake of breath. When I turned, Janet was standing in the hallway, one hand braced against the wall, face drained of color. He knows, she whispered. He knows I'm gone. Janet, he's coming for me. Her breathing accelerated, panic taking hold. You don't understand. He'll kill everyone here. He'll burn this place to the ground. I moved toward her carefully. That's not going to happen. You can't stop him. Nobody can. She was shaking violently now. I should leave. If I leave, maybe he won't. You're not going anywhere. Before I could say more, 2 of my guards rounded the corner, new rotation, unfamiliar with the situation. They saw Janet's distress, saw me approaching her, and their hands moved instinctively toward their weapons. Sir, is there a problem? Stand down, I snapped, stepping between them and Janet. Now. They froze, hands dropping immediately. I turned to Janet, who had pressed herself against the wall, eyes wide with terror. They work for me. They're not going to hurt you. She didn't look convinced. I looked back at the guards. New protocol. The woman in the East Wing guest suite is under my personal protection. You don't approach her. You don't question her. You don't even look at her unless I'm present. Understood. Yes, sir. Get back to your posts. They left quickly. Janet was still trembling, but she was watching me now with something different in her eyes. Not fear. Confusion, maybe, like she couldn't reconcile what she'd just seen with whatever Marcus had told her about me. Come on, I said quietly. Let's get you back to your room. She followed this time without the usual 3 feet of distance. Just 1 step behind me, close enough that I could hear her uneven breathing. When we reached her suite, she paused at the door. Why are you doing this? Doing what? Protecting me. You don't know me. And Marcus, he was your mentor. Your family. Marcus stopped being family the moment he became what he is now. I met her eyes. And you're under my roof. That makes you my responsibility. She studied me for a long moment, like she was searching for the monster Marcus had described. Whatever she saw, it wasn't that. Thank you, she whispered. It was the first time she'd said it. The first time she'd looked at me like I might actually keep my promises. It was a start. Marcus arrived on a Tuesday afternoon, which told me everything I needed to know about his confidence. My security called it in. First 3 black SUVs approaching the main gate, no attempt at concealment. I pulled up the camera feeds and felt something cold settle in my chest. Marcus Hale sat in the back of the center vehicle, visible through the tinted windows, looking exactly as I remembered him. Older now, grayer at the temples, but wearing the same expression of absolute certainty that used to make men twice his age defer to his judgment. He'd brought 8 guards. Elite, from the way they moved ex-military, probably. The kind of protection that costs serious money. Let them through, I told Cole. But keep our people visible. I want him to see exactly what he's walking into. Cole hesitated. You sure about this? He wants to talk. Let's talk. I met Marcus on the front steps of my estate, deliberately positioning myself above him. A petty power play, maybe, but this conversation was going to be about control from the first word. He stepped out of the SUV, smiling that easy, charismatic smile that used to put people at ease before he destroyed them. Andrew. He spread his arms like we were old friends reuniting. It's been too long. 6 years, I said flatly. Since you vanished after trying to undercut my suppliers and split the syndicate. Ancient history. He climbed the steps with practiced casualness, stopping just close enough to be familiar, just far enough to respect my space. I'm here about a different matter. A piece of property that wandered away from me. I believe you have her. Property. The word hit like a slap. You mean Janet Vieira. His smile widened. So she did run to you. I thought she might. She heard enough stories about the fearsome Andrew Schaefer to be properly terrified. But desperation makes people stupid. She's under my protection. Your protection. Marcus laughed, genuine amusement. Andrew, she's not a stray puppy. She's an investment. One I paid good money for, and one I intend to reclaim. The rage building in my chest was carefully controlled, ice cold. You're trafficking women. I'm running a business. You bought her from her stepbrother like she was livestock. I settled the debt. The method of payment was mutually agreed upon. He tilted his head, still smiling. Come on, Andrew. You've done worse. We both have. Don't pretend you've suddenly developed a conscience. I've never bought and sold human beings. No, you just kill them when they inconvenience you. Marcus took another step closer. That girl has been filling your head with lies. She's manipulative, unstable. She'll say anything to avoid going back where she belongs. The doctor who examined her would disagree. 3 years of systematic abuse, Marcus. Broken bones that healed wrong. Psychological trauma that... Training, Marcus interrupted smoothly. Breaking in merchandise requires patience. She was difficult at first, but she learned. And now she's valuable, trained, conditioned, profitable. So I'm asking politely, as a courtesy to our old relationship, return my property. I felt every muscle in my body coil tight. She's not property. She's a person. And she's staying here. The smile finally faded from Marcus's face. You're choosing her over me? Over everything I taught you? Everything we built together? You didn't build anything with me. You used me, same as you used everyone else. And whatever you think you taught me, it didn't include buying women and torturing them into submission. She's broken merchandise at this point anyway, Marcus said, voice hardening, damaged. But she's still mine, and I don't appreciate theft. Get off my property. You're making a mistake, Andrew. His voice dropped, losing all pretense of friendliness. A serious one. That girl belongs to a network you can't even begin to understand. There are powerful people invested in my operations, people who don't take kindly to interference. I'll worry about that when they show up. Right now, I'm worried about you leaving before I have you dragged off." Marcus stared at me for a long moment, and I saw the calculation happening behind his eyes. He was measuring me, testing how far I'd go. "You just made yourself a target," he said quietly. "Not just from me, from everyone connected to what I've built. I'll burn everything you love, Andrew. Your empire, your legacy, everyone under your protection. And when I'm done, I'll take her back anyway." "Are you finished?" He smiled again, colder this time, nothing friendly about it. "For now." Marcus turned and walked back to his SUV, without another word, his guards falling into formation around him. I watched the vehicles pull away, disappearing down the drive, and knew this was far from over. Cole appeared at my elbow. "That went well. He'll be back." "I know. What do you want me to do?" I looked up at the second-floor windows, where I could see Janet's silhouette watching from behind the curtains. "War protocols," I said. "Marcus just declared his intentions. We prepare accordingly. Andrew just made a promise that could cost him everything. Marcus is coming. And trust me, the war that's about to unfold will leave you breathless. If you haven't subscribed yet, do it now. You'll regret missing what happens when a Mafia boss fights not for power, but for someone else's freedom." The attack came 4 days later, exactly when the security rotation changed shifts. Marcus had timed it perfectly. The first explosion tore through the east perimeter wall at 5:47 a.m., while the sky was still gray with pre-dawn light. I was already awake, hadn't slept properly since Marcus's visit, and the blast brought me to my feet with weapon in hand before the second explosion hit the north gate. My phone lit up with alerts. Perimeter breach. Multiple hostiles. Automatic weapons fire. "Cole," I barked into the comm system. "Status. 20, maybe 30 armed combatants. Military tactics. They knew exactly where to hit us." His voice was steady despite the chaos. "Boss, this is coordinated. Professional." Marcus had brought an army. I was already moving, taking the stairs 3 at a time toward Janet's room. She was awake, standing frozen in the center of the suite, eyes wide with terror as gunfire echoed through the estate. "He's here," she whispered. "Oh God, he's here. Come with me, now." I grabbed her hand, she didn't pull away this time, and pulled her into the hallway. "Stay close." We moved fast through corridors I knew by heart, away from the gunfire, toward the center of the house where the panic room was located. Behind us, I could hear boots on marble, shouted commands, the sharp crack of assault rifles. The panic room door was concealed behind a bookshelf in my study-reinforced steel, biometric locks, designed to withstand anything short of military-grade explosives. I pressed my palm to the scanner and the mechanism clicked open. "Inside," I ordered. Janet hesitated at the threshold, looking back at me with absolute terror. "Don't leave me, please. If he gets through that door, he won't. You don't know that. He'll kill you. He'll kill everyone. And then he'll—" Her voice broke. I gripped her shoulders, forcing her to look at me. "Listen to me. I don't break my promises. I told you Marcus would never touch you again, and I meant it. I'm coming back. Andrew, lock this door behind me. Don't open it for anyone except me or Cole. Understood?" She nodded, tears streaming down her face. I stepped back and the door sealed shut with a hydraulic hiss. Through the small reinforced window, I could see her pressing her hands against the glass, and then I turned away. There was a war to fight. The estate had become a battlefield. I found Cole coordinating our defense from the main security hub, screens showing feeds from every camera still functioning. At least 6 were offline, shot out or destroyed in the initial assault. "Mercenaries," Cole confirmed, blood streaming from a cut above his eye. "Former Spetsnaz, maybe cartel. They're pushing hard on the East Wing." "Marcus?" "No visual confirmation yet, but his lieutenant is leading the assault, Viktor Kozlov, former Russian military." I checked my weapon, grabbed extra magazines from the armory. "How many have we lost?" 3 dead, 5 wounded. Cole's jaw tightened. "They came ready for war. Then let's give them one." We hit the mercenaries on the East Wing with everything we had. My men handpicked, loyal, trained for exactly this scenario, fought with brutal efficiency. The marble floors became slick with blood. Bullet holes punched through walls, shattered windows, destroyed priceless artwork I'd never cared about anyway. I caught sight of Viktor Kozlov directing his men from behind an overturned sofa, massive, scarred, barking orders in Russian. He saw me at the same moment, and his weapon swung up. We fired simultaneously. His shot went wide. Mine didn't. Kozlov went down hard, and the mercenaries lost their coordination. Without their commander, they started falling back, tactical discipline fracturing into survival instinct. "They're retreating," Cole shouted, pressing a hand to his side where blood was seeping through his shirt. "East perimeter. Stay down. You're hit." "I'm fine. Go." I pushed through the shattered east wing toward the perimeter. Through the broken windows, I could see figures running toward the tree line. And there, directing the retreat with the same cold calculation he'd always possessed, was Marcus. Our eyes met across the distance. He smiled that same confident smile and disappeared into the woods. I could have pursued him. Should have, probably. But Cole was bleeding, my estate was destroyed, and Janet was locked in a panic room thinking I might be dead. "Let him run," I said into the comm. "Secure the perimeter. Get me a casualty count, and someone get Cole to medical." 20 minutes later, I returned to the panic room, covered in blood that wasn't all mine, exhausted and alive. The door opened at my biometric scan. Janet was huddled in the corner, arms wrapped around herself, looking up with desperate hope that shattered into relief the moment she saw me. "Andrew," she launched herself at me, and I caught her, feeling her body shake with sobs against my chest. "I've got you," I said quietly. "It's over. He's gone. You came back. I told you I would." I held her tighter, feeling the adrenaline finally start to fade. I don't break my promises. She collapsed against me completely, and I let her. Let her cry, let her shake, let her hold on to me like I was the only solid thing left in a world that had just tried to kill us both. Outside, my estate was a war zone. My men were counting bodies. Marcus had escaped, but Janet was safe, and right now, that was the only thing that mattered. The cleanup took 3 days. 5 guards dead, 8 wounded, including Cole, who'd taken a round through his side that missed vital organs by inches. Structural damage to the east wing that would take months to repair. Bullet casings, blood, and shattered glass covering floors that had been pristine a week ago. I attended every funeral personally, looked their families in the eye, and promised them compensation, protection, whatever they needed. It wasn't enough, could never be enough, but it was all I had to offer. Janet didn't leave her room for the first 2 days. I could hear her sometimes through the door crying, pacing. The sudden, sharp gasps that meant nightmares even when she was awake. The sounds of the battle had triggered something deep, dragging her back to whatever hell Marcus had kept her in for 3 years. On the 3rd day, I stopped waiting for her to come out and went in myself. She was sitting on the floor by the window, knees drawn up, staring at nothing. She flinched when I entered but didn't tell me to leave. "You need to eat," I said quietly, setting down the tray I'd brought. "I'm not hungry." "I know. Eat anyway." She looked at the food like it was a foreign concept. "People died because of me. People died because Marcus is a monster who sent them here. That's on him, not you. If you hadn't run, you'd still be his prisoner. Or dead." I sat down against the wall across from her, keeping distance between us. "What happened here isn't your fault, Janet. Don't let him twist it that way." She was quiet for a long moment. "Does it ever stop? The fear?" "I don't know," I admitted, "but it gets easier to carry." I found her a therapist through underground channels, someone who specialized in trauma, who asked no questions about how their patients found them. Dr. Raina Chen met with Janet twice a week in a secure room I'd had soundproofed. I never asked what they discussed. That was Janet's business. But slowly, carefully, she started opening up to me too. "He used to play mind games," she told me one evening, sitting in my study while I worked. She'd started following me around the estate, unable to be alone for long. Convinced me that everyone I'd ever known had forgotten about me, that my family didn't care, that the police wouldn't help, that I deserved what was happening. I looked up from the documents I'd been reviewing. None of that was true. I know that now. But when you hear something every day for 3 years, she trailed off. It starts feeling true. He was conditioning you, breaking down your sense of reality so you'd be easier to control. Did he do that to you too? The question caught me off guard. What? Marcus, you said he trained you, shaped you. Did he manipulate you the same way? I set down my pen, considering the question carefully. In different ways, maybe. He found me when I was 19, angry, directionless, running packages for dealers who would have gotten me killed eventually. He gave me purpose, taught me strategy, discipline, how to think 10 steps ahead. He saved my life more than once. But he also taught me that loyalty was currency, that people were assets to be used or eliminated, that mercy was weakness. I met her eyes. It took me years to realize he was building me into a weapon he could control. When I started making my own decisions, building my own power, he saw it as betrayal. That's when he disappeared. That's when he tried to destroy what I'd built and failed. I thought he'd learned his lesson. Stayed gone. I shook my head. I didn't know he'd just gone underground to build something worse. Janet was quiet, processing. Do you think he can be stopped? Yes, I said with absolute certainty. And he will be. The nightmares were worst at night. I'd hear her screaming from the guest suite. Terror so raw it cut through walls. The first few times, I'd knock, wait for permission to enter, find her curled up, shaking, unable to distinguish dream from memory. After the fourth night, she appeared at my bedroom door at 2 a.m., pale and trembling. Can I? She couldn't finish the sentence. I pulled back the covers on the far side of the bed. Come on. She climbed in carefully, staying on her side, maintaining distance. But she stopped shaking. Her breathing evened out. It became routine. Every night, she'd appear at my door. Every night, I'd let her in. Nothing romantic, nothing complicated, just two damaged people finding safety in proximity. One night, she finally asked the question I'd been waiting for. Why are you doing all this? Really? I stared at the ceiling, considering how honest to be. Because Marcus took something good, the idea of mentorship, of protecting people weaker than yourself, and twisted it into something monstrous. And maybe. I paused. Maybe I need to prove I'm not what he tried to make me. She was quiet for so long I thought she'd fallen asleep. Then, so softly I almost missed it. You're not. You're nothing like him. It was the kindest thing anyone had said to me in years. I didn't respond. Didn't know how. But when I felt her hand find mine in the darkness, I held on. 6 months. That's how long it took to find Marcus Hale. He'd gone deep Eastern Europe, moving between safe houses and countries with loose extradition policies and officials who could be bought. But Marcus had taught me patience, and I'd learned the lesson well. Cole tracked him through financial transactions Marcus thought were untraceable. A shell company purchasing property in Romania, encrypted communications routed through servers in Prague, small mistakes that added up to a location. A remote compound outside Brasov, nestled in the Carpathian Mountains where civilization thinned out and questions weren't asked. I could have sent a team. Could have gone myself with enough firepower to turn the place into rubble. The old Andrew, the one Marcus had shaped, would have done exactly that. But something had shifted over the past 6 months. Maybe it was watching Janet slowly rebuild herself, piece by fragile piece. Maybe it was the nightmares I'd started having about the men who died defending my estate. Maybe it was just exhaustion with the endless cycle of violence that defined my world. Whatever it was, I wanted something different this time. Not blood, justice. I spent 3 months building the case. Cole's people infiltrated Marcus's network, extracting data from every server, every encrypted drive, every hidden file. Trafficking ledgers detailing purchases and sales going back 8 years. Financial documents showing money laundering through 17 countries. Videos, God, the videos that I could barely stomach watching. And testimonies. Women who'd escaped Marcus's network, who'd been too terrified to speak before but found courage when promised protection. Their stories were consistent, detailed, damning. Janet gave hers too, recorded in Dr. Chen's office with me standing outside the door. listening to her describe 3 years of systematic torture in a voice that barely shook anymore. She was stronger now. Not healed, maybe never fully healed, but stronger. When she finished, she found me in the hallway. Will it be enough? It'll be enough, I promised. I didn't deliver the evidence to just any federal agency. Marcus had connections everywhere, bought judges, corrupted officials, politicians on his payroll. But I'd done my research. Found a task force out of Washington run by a prosecutor named Catherine Morrison. Former military, decorated career, reputation for being incorruptible and absolutely relentless. She'd built her career taking down untouchable people. Perfect. The package arrived at her office anonymously. Encrypted drives containing every piece of evidence we'd gathered, along with Marcus's current location and a detailed dossier on his network. No return address. No demands. Just the truth. Documented and irrefutable. Morrison's task force moved fast. Interpol coordinated with Romanian authorities. The compound outside Brașov was raided at dawn, overwhelming force. No warning, no opportunity for Marcus to run again. I watched it happen on the news 3 days later. The footage was grainy, shot from a helicopter. Romanian special forces breaching the compound, Marcus being led out in handcuffs. His usual confidence finally cracked. He looked smaller somehow, diminished without his network protecting him. Janet sat beside me on the couch, gripping my hand tight enough to hurt. "Is it real?" she whispered. "Is he really?" "He's really arrested." The news anchor detailed the charges: international human trafficking, racketeering, money laundering, conspiracy. The evidence was overwhelming, according to the prosecutor's statement. Extradition to the United States was already being processed. Multiple survivors have come forward, the anchor continued, providing testimony about years of systematic abuse within the trafficking network allegedly run by Hale. If convicted on all charges, he faces multiple life sentences, without possibility of parole. Janet's hand trembled in mine. "He's going to prison." "Maximum security," I confirmed. And I made sure certain information reached certain inmates. People who have very strong feelings about men who hurt women. She looked at me, understanding dawning. "You made sure he won't be safe there." Marcus taught me that justice isn't always clean. Sometimes it's just making sure someone faces consequences in a place where their money and connections can't save them. We watched the rest of the coverage in silence. Marcus being transferred to a secure facility. Morrison giving a press conference about the scope of the investigation. Names of other people in Marcus's network being released. Arrests spreading like dominoes. The empire he'd built in the shadows was collapsing in the light. When the news finally moved on to other stories, Janet turned to me. "Thank you." "For what?" "For not killing him." Her voice was quiet but certain. "I wanted you to at first. Wanted him dead for what he did. But this..." She gestured at the blank television screen. "This feels like actual justice. Like the world knows what he is now." I nodded, feeling the weight of it. Revenge would have been simpler, cleaner, faster, more satisfying in the moment. But this felt right in a way that violence never quite did anymore. "He's going to spend the rest of his life in a cage," I said, knowing that everything he built is gone. Everyone he controlled is free. And every day, he'll have to face what he is without any power to hide behind. "Good," Janet whispered. We sat there together in the quiet, and for the first time in 6 months, she looked like she could finally breathe. Justice wasn't lighter than revenge, but it lasted longer. Justice doesn't erase trauma, but it gives survivors their voice back. If Janet's journey from victim to advocate moved you, subscribe and become part of a community that champions these stories. Comment below. Have you ever had to choose between revenge and justice? What would you have done? Spring came slowly that year, but it came. Janet started leaving the estate again, first just to Dr. Chen's office, then to coffee shops, bookstores, places where she could exist without fear. I had security follow at a distance, but she never noticed. She was too busy remembering what freedom felt like. She'd moved out of my bedroom 3 months after Marcus's arrest. Not because the nightmares had stopped, they hadn't. Not completely, but because she was ready to sleep alone again, ready to prove to herself that she could. The night she told me, standing in my doorway like she had so many times before. Something in her expression had changed. "I think I'm okay now," she'd said softly. "Or I will be." I'd nodded, ignoring the unexpected emptiness that settled into the space beside me. "You know where to find me if that changes." But the distance didn't last long. We'd grown too used to each other, the quiet conversations over coffee, the evenings spent reading in comfortable silence, the way she'd look up from whatever she was doing and smile when I entered a room. Comfort had shifted into something deeper without either of us naming it, until one night, she did. "I think I'm falling in love with you," Janet said, standing in my study while I pretended to work. "And I don't know if that's real, or just trauma bonding, or—" I crossed the room and kissed her, gentle and careful, giving her every opportunity to pull away. She didn't. "It's real," I said quietly, "for both of us." 6 months after Marcus's conviction, Janet came to me with a proposal. "I want to start something," she said, spreading documents across my desk. "An advocacy network for trafficking survivors, safe houses, legal support, therapy, job training, everything I wish I'd had when I escaped." I studied the plan she'd drawn up, detailed and thorough. "This will be expensive." "I know. That's why I'm asking if you'll fund it." "Janet, I know where your money comes from," she interrupted. "I'm not naive about what you do, but maybe some of it could go towards something good, something that actually helps people instead of—" She didn't finish, but I understood. "Yes," I said simply. "Yes? I'll fund it. All of it. Whatever you need." She stared at me, surprised. "Just like that?" "Just like that." I leaned back in my chair. "I've been looking for a way out of certain operations anyway. The darker enterprises Marcus once influenced, they don't sit right anymore. Maybe it's time to redirect that capital towards something worth building." The network launched 4 months later. Janet threw herself into it with fierce determination, working 18-hour days to help women who reminded her of herself. Watching her transform from victim to advocate was like witnessing someone come back to life. Cole took over more of my day-to-day operations, handling the legitimate businesses while I quietly dismantled or delegated the rest. Some of my associates called it going soft. I called it evolution. "You've changed," Cole observed one afternoon, reviewing quarterly reports. "Is that a problem?" "No." He smiled slightly. "Just different. Better, maybe." One evening, nearly a year after that night in the garage, Janet found me on the terrace overlooking the rebuilt East Wing. She stood beside me quietly, her hand finding mine. "I used to think I was too broken to deserve peace," she said softly. "That what Marcus did to me had destroyed something fundamental, that I'd never be whole again." I turned to face her. "And now?" "Now I think maybe I was wrong. About being broken, I mean." She looked up at me, eyes clear and certain. "You told me once that I wasn't broken, just wounded. I remember. I didn't believe you then, but I do now." She squeezed my hand. "Wounds can heal, and sometimes the healing makes you stronger than you were before." I pulled her close, feeling the solid reality of her against me, alive, free, choosing to be here. "You were always strong," I said quietly. "You survived 3 years of hell and still had the courage to run, to trust a stranger, to rebuild yourself. That's not broken, Janet. That's extraordinary." She rested her head against my chest, and we stood there watching the sun set over the city, two people who'd found redemption in the most unlikely place, in each other. 2 months later, the security alert came through at 11:47 p.m. Motion detected, sublevel garage 2. I pulled up the camera feed, half expecting trouble despite the months of quiet. Instead, I saw Janet standing in the garage, leaning against my Aston Martin, checking her phone, waiting for me. I found her exactly where the camera had shown, but everything was different now. No fear in her eyes, no trembling hands, just a woman who'd chosen to wait in the place where our story began, transforming it from a site of trauma into something else entirely. "Thought I'd meet you down here," she said, smiling. Seemed appropriate. I crossed the distance between us, remembering the first time I'd seen her here broken, terrified, barely standing. Now she stood tall, whole, her own person again. "You're not scared anymore," I observed. "No," she agreed. "Not of this place, not of you, not of anything." She reached up and kissed me, and I tasted freedom in it, hers and maybe mine too. We'd both been shaped by violence, by Marcus's cruelty and the darkness of the world we'd inhabited. But we'd chosen something different, something better. Not revenge, not blood, just healing, justice, love. And in the end, that was the greatest redemption of all.